I'm rolling down the highway with my woolly friend. I'm leaving the shadows in the rear. Learning about our history as we tour this land. Eating junk food, buying souvenirs. We'll visit fields of battle and homes of presidents. Graveyards, statues, parks, and monuments. Eat your peas, Oliver. We're rolling down the highway across this promised land. Oh, Amos hits the highway with his friend. That's you, Oliver. Amos hits the highway with his friend. Almost there. Amos hits the highway with his friend. I see it, Oliver. Howdy, young'uns. My name is Amos Hastings, and I want to welcome you to the first episode of Amos Hits the Highway. I'm standing at Flag PLaza in the historic city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And this is a great place to talk about the United States flag and a special man who devoted his life to serving it, the late George Cahill. George grew up in the Midwest, guided by parents who taught him about duty to God and to his country. Maybe George's recognition of the importance of duty was why he joined the Boy Scouts. If he hadn't known about duty before, the Boy Scouts would have taught him. The founder of the Boy Scouts said it this way: "A scout must do his duty before anything else, even though he gives up his own pleasure or comfort or safety to do it." George became an Eagle Scout, the highest rank a scout can achieve. You've got to be special to be an Eagle Scout, and George was special. Because George understood his duty, he enlisted in the Army soon after World War II began, though he was only 17, just a boy. George served in a B-17 bomber. How would you like to stuff yourself in a plastic bubble in the nose of an airplane and fly thousands of feet in the air while people tried to shoot you? I sure wouldn't. That's what George did on over 24 missions. And he came close to dying more than a few times. But George survived the war and returned to his family. Not long after World War II ended, George went to work for the Boy Scouts. Scouting was in George's blood. And then, in 1961, George was appointed Scout Executive for the Pittsburgh area. George looked around the city and had an idea. "We need a Scout headquarters in Pittsburgh," he said, "and we need a place to honor the flag." Well, here it is, folks, Flag PLaza, where I stand. It was all George's idea, and George made it happen. George wasn't done, though. Men like George are never done. Next, he founded the National Flag Foundation, an organization that teaches the history of the flag and what it stands for, an organization that still exists today. George accomplished a lot more in his life and gathered a lot of awards and plenty of medals, too. But if George was alive today, he wouldn't want me talking about him. That wasn't George's way. "Enough about me, Amos," he'd say. "Teach the young folks about the Founding Fathers. Teach them how to think about the flag." That's what we're going to do. Nothing would have pleased George more. You see the flag everywhere. You probably have one hanging on your house. It waves over the school and the bank and the post office, and I have one hanging on my barn. But how often have you thought about what the flag stands for? The flag isn't for decoration. It's a symbol. And few symbols carry more meaning than Old Glory. Now, a symbol ain't always good. When you see this flag, I doubt you smile and think of goodness. For this flag represents evil, the worst of humankind. But this flag stands for liberty and for what is right and good. And no one understood that more than George. "Freedom isn't free," George would often tell his children. And that wasn't an empty phrase to George. No, sir. George had watched friends die fighting for freedom. He'd seen the flags draped over their caskets. How should we think about the flag? George would want us to begin where all things begin, with God. Have you ever read this passage from Genesis? Then God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light upon the earth." Are you wondering what the Bible has to do with a flag? Listen closely, and I'll explain it. George once said that the first gift the founders of our nation gave us was the Declaration of Independence. What a gift that was! You see, before the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration, no government had ever recognized rights as given by God. Kings gave rights, and dictators gave rights, and whoever had the biggest fist and the most guns gave rights. But they could take them back, too, whenever they wanted. Nope, our founder said. Nope, that's not right. Not right at all. God gives us rights, and what God gives, no one can take away. The founders had acknowledged the authority of God as the foundation of government. And then George mentioned the second gift, one that brought tears to his eyes when he saw it, the United States flag. Now, why would George cry when he saw a flag? Because George saw the flag as a symbol, and I hope you'll begin to see it that way too. The founders knew a thing or two about symbols. When they signed their names to the Declaration of Independence, they looked to the heavens for guidance. When they created the flag, they looked to the heavens again. Most of the law Congress passed to establish the flag doesn't exactly stir the soul. Read along with me again. Resolved that the flag of the United States be made of 13 stripes, alternate red and white, and that the Union be 13 stars, white, in a blue field. Folks, that's a sewing pattern. But then these wise fellas added a few words at the end, a few words that made a world of difference. They said the flag represented a new constellation. You've seen constellations in the night sky. You can probably identify the Big Dipper. What did they mean by a new constellation? Could that be another symbol? Remember reading from Genesis about how God had placed the stars in the sky? The founders, those wise people, knowing that no government can exist, that no rights can exist unless they're given by God, saw the flag as a symbol, a new constellation of 13 bright stars ordained by God and waving over a land of liberty. Ain't that a pretty thought? It's no wonder George appreciated the founding fathers. George never talked much about his time in the war. Like all brave men, George had been awful scared, shivering, bone-shaking, knee-knocking, hard to swallow scared. George was far from the people he loved, flying high above the earth, not knowing if he'd make it home. But he was closer to that new constellation, and he was closer to God. In the end, that was all George needed. George Cahill passed away in 2018, and the flag he loved waved just a bit prouder. But folks like George, they never leave us. They live on through their families and their friends and their associates and through the people whose lives they've touched. I remember a line from a favorite movie, a movie starring one of George's friends. Each man's life touches so many other lives, and when he isn't around, he leaves an awful hole, doesn't he? Folks, that line could have been written for George Cahill. This is Amos Hastings for Liberty Jr., and I thank you for watching.